Good afternoon from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services National Conservation Training Center in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. My name is Ashley Fortune Isham, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. And this webinar series is held in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey's National Climate Change and Wildlife Science Center, or NCCWSC, NIST, and this is in Reston, Virginia. So the NCCWSC Climate Change, Science and Management webinar series highlights their sponsored science projects related to climate change impacts and adaptation, and aims to increase awareness and inform participants like you about potential and predicted climate change impacts on fish and wildlife. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sean Carter to introduce today's speaker. Sean?
Thanks, Ashley. Well, today it's my pleasure to introduce April Taylor. She's a sustainability scientist with the Chickasaw Nation and a member of the South Central Climate Science Center in Norman, Oklahoma, which, by the way, was recently awarded a Department of Interior Environmental Achievement Award. So April connects 68 tribes to climate scientists in Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, and Louisiana, and she also builds staff capacity in climate vulnerability and adaptation planning. And she works with tribal education programs to develop opportunities for tribal students in climate science fields. She's had speaking engagement with multiple tribal councils and working groups, and she holds degrees from Texas A&M and the University of South Carolina. She's a Chickasaw citizen and with a family tradition of Native American grafted pecan trees, and gains inspiration by helping the tribes manage and plan for future impacts of climate change. And today, she's going to be talking about her work in developing and implementing tribal engagement strategies. So thank you for joining us, April, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and just dive right in and get started. So a little bit on my position. The way I explain my position is it includes three things. One, matchmaking of the tribal staff. And so I'm out engaging with the tribal staff on a regular basis and with the climate scientists or climate researchers. And so here at the Climate Science Center, we're very involved with the climate science and researchers that are working in various fields. And so I'm sort of that matchmaker that connects the two groups together to go after projects or to work on projects. The second thing is we work toward building tribal capacity by providing trainings or bringing in trainings for tribal staff for vulnerability assessments and climate adaptation planning. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. And then the third aspect, as Sean said, we do a lot of tribal youth programs as well. And so we're out doing activities and science and things with tribal youth as well. So I first wanted to talk briefly about the Climate Science Centers. There are 8 Climate Science Centers in the U.S., and this is a map of their regions. The South Central Climate Science Center is there in blue. The stars indicate the host university, and then the circles are the consortium members of each Climate Science Center. So we're hosted at the University of Oklahoma here in Norman, Oklahoma. And as you can see, the Climate Science Centers have what we call fuzzy boundaries. We're very much encouraged to work across our regions. Drought is not just a South Central thing. And so there are definitely things that we work together across these jurisdictions. So I said, as I mentioned, on the consortium side, we have the University of Oklahoma is our host, and then we have Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and Louisiana State. We also have Chickasaw Nation and Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and then we also have the NOAA Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Lab out of Princeton that does a lot of the climate modeling. So this figure here shows how many of the climate organizations partner and work together. And so the Climate Science Center is in the yellow box and really shows how we work directly with the climate scientists and then relay that to other organizations that may use the climate science or transfer that information in a way that the end users can use that climate science. And then there's also a feedback from those end users and partners on what climate science is needed from the climate scientist. So in our South Central Climate Science Center region, we have 68 tribes, and this is a map showing our tribal jurisdictions in our region. So as you can see, there are many areas that it's very difficult to work in Oklahoma, for example, without working with the tribes. And so, so this is a map showing those tribes. And right now, we are the only Climate Science Center with sovereign tribal nations on the consortium. The Northeast Climate Science Center has a tribal college, the Menominee Tribal College. We are the only Climate Science Center at this time that has 2 full-time tribal liaisons. I started in June of 2012, and Kim Merriman started in June of 2014. And Kim primarily is working with our New Mexico tribes. In 2014, we published our Tribal Engagement Strategy. It is a USGS Circular 1396, so you can Google this and find this online. And there's a lot involved in this Tribal Engagement Strategy, and it's a really good resource to starting your Tribal Engagement Strategy. But this slide here sort of explains our approach. So as you can see on the axis, as you go across is in time and resources that you devote to your tribal engagement, you're increasing your tribal capacity and your tribal involvement as you go. And so basically, if you start on the left-hand side, the way we started was a lot of introductory meetings and outreach to tribal staff, introducing ourselves and creating that sort of relationship and letting them know who we are and what we have to offer and getting feedback from them. And then we started doing a lot of tribal youth programs and going out to festivals and after-school programs and youth camps and things like that, and really spending time and developing these relationships and commitment to the Native youth and building their capacity of next generation of tribal staff. And then the next sort of piece is building the tribal staff capacity in climate-related areas. And that sort of goes in parallel to our engagement with the researchers and building their capacity in how to work in Indian country and how to develop these relationships. So currently, these numbers in red sort of show from years 1 through 3 of the numbers of how many of these types of activities we've been doing. So we've done over 17 youth activities. We've had over 16 classes. I think we're up to 22 or 23 classes we've done. And then we're starting to really ramp up some of our working in Indian country efforts. So we've had 1 class and 1 webinar at this time. And then the idea is then we'll start working on the co-production of the climate science projects and really considering the tribes as equal partners in developing the climate science projects and tools from the get-go. And so currently we have 3 projects that we have funded, and some of those have wrapped up and there are results available. But the end goal really is about the tribes independently being able to do their own climate research projects and integrating the climate science into their various tribal plans. whether that's their water plan, their hazard mitigation plan, transportation plans, or whatever type of plans that they are working on. So I'm going to go in and give a few examples of the types of things from each of these different categories. And so I mentioned the introductory meetings, and really the purpose of that is to introduce your staff and your tribal and to the tribal groups and organizations. And you'd be really surprised about how many various groups there are out there and organizations that the tribal staff get together. And so this has grown over time, and we've been able to continue to involved at a regional level and at the national level. So as you can see, we've continued to increase the number of groups and outreach that we've been able to involve in. And we've had some really good opportunities over the years to do this type of activity. The second piece is the tribal youth programs. So really this is about developing the relationships with the tribe and building their capacity of their next generation of tribal staff and promoting native scientists in climate-related fields and diversifying climate science areas. And so some examples of that, the 8 Northern Indian Pueblos Council has a summer camp where they have, each of the 23 tribes send high school students to it. And in year 2, several of our CSC staff spent a day at the camp talking about drought and doing a soil infiltration activity. And so we really consider this the type of activity that we're trying to build upon. It's intertribal, it's regional, and it's a real good quality time with the students. We have developed our strategies where we don't focus on so much of the activities where you only get like 20 seconds with a student, or you have a lot of students that pass through. We'd much rather do a full experience or a full day or several hours with a group of students and really have them walk away with something learned from it. And so this is a couple pictures from us there at the Indian Art School in Santa Fe, and the students doing their soil infiltration activities. And this was just a really bright group of high schoolers, and we started out talking about what is drought and some of the activity and stuff, but by the end of the day, they just really got it, and it was really cool to see that transformation and that interest of how drought impacts their communities. Another example is we've done the pre-conference for the Indian Education Summit here in Oklahoma. And this is Indian educators. And so basically we did a day with the teachers. We called it Weather and Climate Scientist in Action Tour. They got to tour the National Weather Center. We shared lots of resources with them, gave away some kits and things for them to take back to their classrooms. And so this is another type of activity that we try to focus on. And we had 22 Indian educators that day. And this is a couple pictures from us that day. We had a native scientist come in and talk about her work and her research, and the teachers got to engage with her. And so we've considered things like Skyping in a native scientist to classrooms and things like that. So for our youth activities for the first 3 years, we've had over 17 activities. We've engaged with over 700 youth, and we've really had over 1,200 contact hours with them. And that continues to grow, and that interest in our capacity. So we've developed a whole list of youth activities that we have purchased, and we go out and do on a regular basis. And so we're gearing up for the summer and looking forward to another year of our youth activities. I also, and I'll talk about that too, so you'll see here that I have interns and different RU students, which are undergraduate research students that work with me as well. And so that's been a really cool opportunity to work with the college age as well. So now moving on to building the tribal capacity or our training. And so one thing I want to say is by offering a training is one key way to develop that relationship with the tribal staff. You're providing them something, but you're also interacting with them for a significant amount of time and learning about what they're dealing with or what their need and what kind of technical assistance they're needing help with. And so we've had, like I said, over, I think, 23 trainings at this point. And so then in year 4, we really started thinking about what is our strategy long term? What do we want to, what trainings do we want to be offering? And starting to thinking toward a curriculum or certification. Take this first, take this second type of things, and breaking it down into pieces that they can work with. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of those trainings. One of the type of trainings we have done is what we called environmental problem solving with GIS. We had lots of partners with this and lots of leveraging. So the Oklahoma Water Science Center, the BOR, BIA, Tribal GIS, Choctaw Nation. And what we did is we had two-day trainings. One was here in Norman in August of 2014, and then we had another one in November in Albuquerque. And talk about a class that filled up really quickly and met its capacity. And what was really cool about this one was one of our first ones that we had such a diverse audience. We had tribal staff from so many different departments, not just the environmental department. We've had tribes from all across the United States that came in for this and paid for their travel to come up for these trainings and things like that. And so it was really cool. And I just want to mention that since this has sort of happened, DIA has a climate GIS coordinator, Margaret Herzog. If you don't know who that is, be more than willing to pass along that contact information. And so she is a good contact for tribal GIS and climate change. And these are a couple pictures from those trainings. As you can see, they're very full. The one on the left is from our Norman, Oklahoma training here at the Climate Science Center. And then the one on the right is from at SIPI at the Tribal College in Albuquerque. And so it's been really cool to see the turnout for some of these trainings. Another type of training that we've done is in both these trainings, the GIS trainings and the grant writing trainings were specifically asked of us. That is a grant writing training. So I was asked specifically for this, and so we've been doing a series of grant writing trainings. And so we partnered, again, with several partners on this. We partnered with our Oklahoma EPSCoR, which is an NSF large grant. We partnered with EPA Region 9 and our OU Center for Program Development and Enrichment, which is sort of our grant writing staff here at OU. And so we've had several of these workshops, and it's been very successful. But what's been really cool about these trainings is we've been able to do a lot of role-playing and engagement where they actually have to practice the skills that they're learning. And so they have to talk to the partners and figure out, what their best, how they might partner and what the benefit of that is. They might talk to a scientist, to different types of scientists, and And so what's the challenges of that, partnering with scientists or talking to a program officer. And so one of the things that we found is that many of the tribal staff are very used to they may be used to only one type of grant or one type of funding mechanism. And with climate change, it's so diverse and there's so many different agencies and opportunities out there. So this is a challenging aspect of developing your funding strategy and how to move forward to fund your entire climate adaptation plan or the different pieces. And so that's something that many of the staff are challenged with. So here's a couple of pictures from the Dallas training in New Mexico. We had 50 tribal staff in the room, and so it was very full. And we tagged this onto the Tribal Summit for EPA Region 9. And before we even got our booth space set up, people were coming by and had heard about the grant writing training, and so they were sort of scaring me because I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a big thing, and are we ready for it? And but it was really cool to see that interest in our trainings. So this is a summary from our first 3 years. We had 9 trainings in the first 3 years. And like I said, we're now up to 22. We've had great turnout and lots of contact hours through all the trainings we've hosted over the last few years. So then the third thing I want to talk about briefly is the importance of educating your researchers on how to develop these relationships in Indian country, and they're making sure that they're doing ethical research practices and doing and considering how they're doing, how their research is impacting the tribal communities. And so some of the themes here are: how do you develop that relationship? How do you integrate tribal traditional knowledge or TK or cultural resources? Learning about tribal IRBs or institutional review boards and things like that. And so in years, we did a webinar and brought in Kyle White to talk about some of this. And then we also brought in Larry Cohen to do a training. And now what we've done is we're developing a Working in Indian Country guidebook for researchers. And we are very close to having that finished and available. So then we will be piloting our Working in Indian Country research and working toward a strategy on how we want to offer this moving forward. So as I said, in year 3, we hosted, as an example, there's this book called Working in Indian Country by Larry Cohen. And so we brought him in, and we had probably 20 people, but what was really interesting is we had a very diverse group of FEMA people, U.S. Forest people, all sorts of just partners and things as well in the room, along with the researchers. And so we're continuing to work and build on these types of activities as well. So the other aspect that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about an example of a project where we have partnered with tribes. And so the name of the project that I want to talk about is called Impacts of Climate Change on Flows in the Red River Basin. And the Red River Basin, as you can see here in the image, crosses many tribal jurisdictions from its origin in New Mexico all the way down into the Mississippi and Louisiana. So there are 15 tribes that this crosses. And then we also partnered with the University of Oklahoma and NOAA's Geophysics Dynamics Lab and consultants. So we really considered this the type of scale and regional type of projects that we look for and partnerships. And so basically one of the big themes of this is now the Chickasaw Nation and the Choctaw Nation has and is using the best available tools. For example, the Army Corps of Engineers Riverware model, and they also have access and are using the best available downscaling data for their water plan. And so this is a figure from some of the results here showing the changes in the flows within the watershed under an RCP 8.5, which is basically the emission scenario. And so as you can see, many of these yellow circles indicate that those flows are going to be decreasing from current values, and so much lower flows are potentially in much of the area of the Red River Basin. So some success stories. We recently finished up, as of the end of December, a grant where we worked with the Choctaw Nation and the NCTC, which is the National Conservation Training Center that Ashley mentioned. And we hosted a couple of their vulnerability assessment trainings and for the first time offered those for our tribal audience. We've also partnered with OU's Regional and City Planning Department and are working with 5 tribes to do tribal vulnerability assessments. Another key thing that I'm going to talk a little bit more about here in a second is that based off of my position and our work here at the South Central Climate Science Center, BIA is funding for the other climate science centers in the nation to get tribal liaison positions. The Desert LCC and the Southern Rockies LCC have been very involved in developing their tribal committees and having tribal representation on their various stakeholder groups and in their activities. And I hear about it all the time, and when I hit the door at different tribal meetings, more and more tribes are including climate science or climate projects in their grants and are interested in partnering. So next I want to talk just a little bit about these new tribal liaison positions. And so basically they've asked the CSC, the Climate Science Center, to contribute to the orientation of these new tribal liaisons. And so we will include our other climate science centers and their tribal activities as well. So sort of introducing them to who are the CSCs and what types of things have already been done in the various regions. And sort of develop a level playing field, as I would describe it. We're trying to bring them all up to the same level so that we all can work together and sort of partner as well. And the purpose is sort of provide some kind of coordination between the climate science centers and what we can offer for tribes in our regions and nationally. So next, I just put in a couple upcoming activities. I was just talking to Ashley a little bit before this call, before the webinar started. We have 6 Native interns here at the Climate Science Center, and 2 just started on Monday. So we're pretty excited about that. We have some Climate 101 trainings that we'll be doing in Louisiana and New Mexico this year. We'll be at the Tubberjacat Conference, which is a tribal cultural resource staff conference, and so we're going to do a session there. We're doing a tribal student conference on climate change, and so we're going to rotate between the 3 tribal colleges in Oklahoma each year, and so we'll have our first one this year at the College of Muskogee Nation, in Oklahoma. We're also working on our pilot trainings for our Working in Indian Country for researchers this year. We also have 6 Chickasaw Nation drought workshops and 2 master students that we're working on that will feed into the Chickasaw Nation's drought plan that we're working on. And then we also have a climate youth camp at NCTC coming up in July, and we also have other youth camps that we work with, for example, the Jones Academy, which is a Choctaw school in southeastern Oklahoma, and their STEM camp. So that's just some examples of the types of things we have coming up. And this is my contact information and Kim Merriman's contact. Her email just changed, and so I meant to put that in there. But feel free to email me, and I can definitely put you in touch with Kim. So that's all I have. I think Ashley's going to take over and sort of lead any questions.
Yes, excellent job, April. Thank you very much. All right, one just came in, and it's from Bradley, and it says, I'm interested in knowing how one might go about collecting traditional wisdom practices to incorporate in any sustainability initiatives.
So that depends on the tribe. Every tribe is different, and how they, and if they're interested in that type of thing, and whether they want to share that. Sort of my advice on that is definitely considering tribal IRB approval is an obvious first step for learning about does the tribe have an IRB or a process of approval for those types of things, or if they need to go through the regional IHS, which is the Indian Health Service IRB types of things. And so there's a lot of different approaches out there on how to, whether that's integrating it into an already method or methods in Indian country on how to collect traditional knowledge and to protect that knowledge. And also a lot of rules about whether you can publish that or get approval for publishing or sharing that knowledge or presenting on it. And so there are a lot of things like that to consider. Right, and so Menominee Nation also just posted, there are a lot of guidebooks out there as well and resources on for considering traditional knowledge in climate change initiatives. And so I'm assuming that was Chris or Marie that posted that resource there in the chat box. But feel free to email me if you have any specific questions related to that, and I definitely can point you in a good direction.
And then the next question comes from Alice. It says, thanks, April. I wonder if you have any outputs, reports, articles, or anything along those lines from the Red River Basin project that you'd be willing to share. It looks like a great project.
Allison, yes, I can definitely send you the end of the project report. We'll also have some fact sheets and things, hopefully here soon. That definitely, I'd love to share that with you, and I'll make sure I send you a copy.
And I'm just reading something also from the nation. It says guidelines for considering traditional knowledges, TKs, and climate change initiatives is a publication intended to be an informational resource for tribes, agencies, and organizations across the United States interested in understanding TKs in the context of climate change. So the next question comes from Jennifer, and it says, beyond the regional scale, do you have any recommendations for working toward tribal engagement at a national scale? There's a second part to that question. What groups or entities should we try to work with?
So again, it's going to depend on what region you're from, but at a national scale, these new tribal liaisons, that's sort of one of the points of what we're going to try to do is develop some coordination nationally in what we're providing and what we're offering. But what's another thing that we're trying to do here at the Climate Science Center is we've developed what we call our Tribal Curriculum Working Group. And basically that we've had over 25 people from different agencies, I mean, anywhere from NASA, EPA, our LCCs, the Corps of Engineers, NRCS. I mean, it was really interesting to see that interest in wanting to provide and build tribal capacity in a lot of these areas. And so so that's one of our approaches, is developing sort of an interagency working group for our region.
Excellent, thank you. From Monica. Oh, and then as you guys can see, that just popped up in the chat box. They wrote, Nation just wrote, Rising Voices is a great group for that as well. And our next question comes from Monica, and it says, are any Climate Science Center liaison Native tribal members?
So like I said, currently there are just us two, April and Kim. And yes, so we have up to 9 tribal staff that are here at the South Central Climate Science Center. The new tribal liaisons that are being hired it's going to be contracted out to a tribal organization. And so I'm assuming that they will have a Native preference as well. So those new tribal liaisons most likely will be Native. I don't know if there most likely won't be tribal staff like I am, but they'll be Native at least.
Thank you. And then we had a question, and Shannon McNeely had her hand raised. Shannon.
Hi, April. It's Shannon McNeely from the North Central Climate Science Center in Colorado State University. Thanks for your great presentation. That was really informative. I have a question about the new BIA sponsored tribal liaisons. I understand you guys are taking on some of the coordination and seems like maybe some initial training for those folks when they come on. And I was just curious how you're thinking about interacting and incorporating folks from the other CSCs who have already been involved in tribal engagement. You know, none of the other centers have a quote unquote formal tribal liaison yet, but they all pretty much have had a lot of tribal engagement activities. Speaking for ourselves, you know, we've already been doing a lot of training, not a lot, but some training, and we've got some projects on the ground and things like that. So I'm just curious what the thinking is about bringing in folks that have already been involved in tribal engagement in those other centers as you're sort of bringing on these new tribal liaisons in this coordination effort.
So based off of some conversations with Kim Winton, who is more involved in the actual relations with the BIA and the selection committee, we have discussed that we will be inviting the other climate science centers into, we're offering to host the orientation here in Norman at the Climate Science Center. And inviting in the other Climate Science Center to bring somebody in from the other Climate Science Centers to talk about what they've done in their region and to share those resources as well. So currently we'll have an initial orientation here for several days and really do a lot of discussing what's most needed or where they want to go, and types of things and what's priorities and strategic planning. And then sort of what I've proposed at this time is then we would have regular calls or meetings and some kind of platform where we're sharing the resources with all the tribal liaisons, whether that's training materials or presentations or and talking about, you know, how we did this or how we might work together on different things. And so my understanding is that Kim Winton at the DC trip next week was going to talk to the CSC directors a little more about what they would like to commit to it or what they would like to share on this platform that we're going to be putting together for the coordination.
Okay, thanks. That sounds great. And do you have an idea of when, I know it kind of depends on a lot of variables, but do you guys already have sort of a general time frame in mind for that orientation?
Absolutely. So on my schedule, I believe we're shooting for June for that initial orientation. I have a couple weeks that are penciled in, but nothing has been confirmed. So basically, the deadline has passed for them to actually, for the tribal organizations to submit. Then there'll be cooperative agreements completed, and then they'll have 60 to 90 days, was the last thing I heard, to actually hire. And so then I think that will sort of play into the timing of the initial orientation and when that will be planned out. On our end, we are talking about bringing in a USGS detail for to help with some of this coordination and initial planning types of things. And so that's broadly what I know at this time.
Okay, thanks.
April, did you have any other closing comments that you'd like to make?
Just thank you, and thank you all for the interest, and feel free to email me.
Thank you, April. And then Sean or anybody from the NCCWSC, any closing comments as well?
Sean had to step away early, but this is Elda Varela with NCWISC, and we just wanted to say thank you, April. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you to everyone who joined us for the webinar today.
All right. Well, I just wanted to say, as the others have, thank you very much for attending. April, wonderful presentation.